Hey, we're in James. We started James last week out in the park. So if you were with us in the park, we started it. We did a little intro to it, did a handful of verses at the beginning of it. And James tells us at the very beginning of it, he's actually aiming at those people who are going through troubles. But for them, lots of trouble. So he writes to the Jewish believers who are scattered. And if you look at the history in the early first century after Jesus dies and resurrects, and then there's a troubled time for the church, especially you remember in Acts for the stoning of Stephen. And at the point of stoning of Stephen, it turns out that there's a lot of persecution of the early followers of Jesus. So we're in that period, and James is writing to them, James the brother of Jesus. He demurs from promoting the fact as he opens the letter that he's the brother of Jesus, which I think is amazing because I would have touted it. James, hey, the brother of Jesus. Yeah. He doesn't do that. So it's an amazing. Instead, he's a servant. He's a doulos of God. Doulos of actually Jesus, the Messiah as well. So anyway, we covered that last week. And I covered the fact that when he talks about us being in troubled times, he says you need to endure these troubled times because they're actually good for you. And in the end, he says it produces steadfastness, and that's what I quote right there in verse 4. And that steadfastness, as you stay under that load, will have its complete work. It'll have its full effect. That's the teleos ergon, the full work, and that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And that complete word always reminds me of having all your marbles. Because the word means having all your bits, is what it means. All your bits, or all your marbles. I don't have all my marbles? No. At the fall, because of Adam and Eve, you don't have all your marbles. And so God's in the process of remaking you and restoring all those bits. So he warns us, don't get out from under the troubles too quickly. Stay under, hupomeno, stay under those things, because they will ensure that God will return to you all your marbles. And he's going to do that through James. So as you look at the book of James, he's going to talk about the marbles we're missing. So it's all these bits. It's all these bits over here. And James is arranged not in a thesis organized way, like, I have my proposition, I have my supporting arguments, I have my conclusion. It's not that kind of an arc. It's more kind of a shotgun of bits. It really is. Just like Proverbs. Have you read Proverbs? Proverbs has sections that are kind of have arcs to them. There's orientation to them. But it's largely a bunch of bits stuck out there. James is very much like that. So we categorize it as wisdom literature. So that's what he's all about. Also, an emphasis on James is that James is going to talk about practice more than he talks about precepts. I don't know where I heard this phrase, but it's been stuck in my head for years and years and years. So when James talks about things that are important to him, the bits that we're missing, they really emphasize what you do, not what you believe. When you read Romans, it emphasizes what you believe more than what you do, okay? When you look at Ephesians, the first 3 of the 6 chapters talk about what you should believe, and the last 3 about what you should do. So there's a conscious split when you look at these things. James is almost always about what you should do. So that's very practical in that sense. Helps us walk day by day. So we pick up today in verse 5, and I'll just read the entire passage we're going to do today, and then we'll come back and pick it apart. This is everything today. That's all we're going to do. Sorry, that's all of James we're going to do today. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that's driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. The end. Close the book, go home, have coffee. No, because James is talking about what you need to do. And also he uses an economy of words. He's not going to use a lot of words, so we need to go back and pick it up. Let's just look at the first section, this one in verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it'll be given him. So really the first question is, what is wisdom? And we could do a quiz right now, right here, and do a multiple choice test and say, what is wisdom? Is it A, this? Is it B, this? Is it... And we'd probably get a whole mix mix of answers. So we need to get squared away with what wisdom is, because this is not the last time in James's book he's going to talk about wisdom. He's going to hit it really hard in the 3rd chapter as well. And by the way, I said this is like wisdom literature, James. So the whole book is really about that. So we need to get wisdom squared away and see what it really is from a biblical sense. So wisdom is something we're not sure we have. And so what is it really? It's easiest to talk about wisdom by talking about its opposite. And its opposite is embodied in a fool. Now, we could probably answer what a fool is easier than we could answer what wisdom is, right? I think. Because many times we look at things that other people do and say, well, that's foolish. Or we look at things that we do after the fact and go, well, that was foolish. We can make a list. It's very easy. It's very easy to do that. An acquaintance of mine wrote a book about James, and he said this in it. He said, a fool in the Old Testament sense is not one who knows nothing, but one who behaves badly. It's not one who knows nothing or knows the wrong thing. It's one who behaves badly. And as you're thinking about the examples you're coming up with, foolish things, they're all things that people did, right? Or things that you did. It's not believing wrong. It's something you did that was really stupid. I mean, it was foolish in the end. So we know. So it turns out that wisdom has a major component of action. That's a fool. That's a picture, no, not actually a picture of me, but that could be me about that age, because I was constantly sticking stuff in outlets, and I think that's responsible for why I studied electronics later in life. Not because it fried my brain, but because I wanted to know what was in that outlet right there. So we would look at that, and we'd say that is a foolish action. All those in favor of foolishness? Yeah, that's a foolish action right there. We know that. And as you sort of take apart why that's a foolish action, it's because there's great danger behind that thing. And you just don't stick butter knives in places of great danger. I stuck lots of things in outlets, and I found out early on that you had to get narrow, skinny things to go in the outlet. You know, even screwdrivers are too fat to go in the outlets. I figured that out very soon. So then I just got little bits of wire. And that's really bad. I could tell you a whole list of things. Did you do that too?
No, but my son did, and when his grandfather asked him what he did, he showed him again.
What did you do, son? I did this. Watch. Oh my gosh. Double foolish. Do it once, twice. Yeah, okay. So that's foolishness. We really have a good handle on foolishness. We know what a lack of wisdom looks like. But when it comes down to saying, well, but what does wisdom look like? It's a little harder, but we'll figure it out in a second. But again, this child, you couldn't claim being foolish until he took the action of shoving the butter knife in there. If he just sat on the side and wondered, that would not be foolish. You know, I might be ignorant, but it wouldn't be foolish. It's the action that makes it foolish. So in a real sense, wisdom is an action issue. Wisdom, every time now you see the word wisdom, think action. Wisdom is an action. Wisdom is an action. It's not just a belief. Now, there's some belief behind it that causes it, but unless it comes to fruition in an action, it's not really wisdom. So let me take a very famous example. This is a painting by Gaspar de Crayer. Can you figure out what this scene is from the Old Testament? There's a dead baby down here. There's a live baby over here. There's a mother here and a mother there, and there's a king. I gave it away. I was trying to give it away, Michael. Yeah, okay, so that's Solomon. That's Solomon and his threat to cut the two babies in half. You remember how the story goes? You know, two women, actually they're both prostitutes, I don't know if you remember that. They both have children. They go to bed, they go to sleep one night, they wake up, one of the children is dead, and then there's a dispute in the morning because it looks like one of the woman with the dead baby steals the baby from the other woman. They wake up, there's this dispute, whose baby is it? They argue. They come to the king and they say to the king, oh king, you know, she claims, he said, she said, and now we have two women claiming the rights to this one living child. How is Solomon supposed to solve this? And so this is very famous. So this is how he solves it. This is in 1 Kings 3. You can read the bigger story that I just summarized for you. The king said, bring me a sword. So a sword was brought before the king. And the king said, divide the living child in two and give half to the one and half to the other. Very famous. Even if you're not a believer, almost everybody knows this story. And so that resulted from a previous part in 1 Kings 3, where when Solomon is brought to the throne after David dies, Solomon is asking God for help in ruling Israel. So at Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night, and God said, "Ask what I shall give you." This is kind of the biblical version of the genie in the bottle thing, but this is a real thing. So in his despair about not being equipped to run Israel, he asked God, "What am I supposed to do?" And God says, "Ask. What will you ask for?" Now, if you or I were going to ask, we could ask for peace in the region. We could ask for lots of cash. We could ask for anything we want. And what he asked for, verse 7, "And now Solomon says, O Lord my God, you have made your servant Solomon king in place of David my father, although I am but a little child." Now, he's not really a child in age. He's older, but I'm a child. I don't know how to go out or come in. He's saying, look, I'm in charge of this nation of your people, but in real sense, I'm not equipped to do this. I'm like a child. I don't even know how to go out of the house or come into the house. And we have lots of metaphors we use for that. I'm too stupid to blah, 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 blah. So that's what he's saying in front of God. So when he admits this to God, then his request, "Give your servant therefore an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this, your great people?" And God's response to that in verse 12, "Behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you." So Solomon is our paragon of wisdom. So if you don't really understand what wisdom is, we can look at him. And we can even go back to this particular example. Did you know that in the threat to separate these babies, it's the very first thing that comes to Solomon's desk after he prays for wisdom? The very first thing in the account. It's the very first thing. So God's making a point about the fact that Solomon's wisdom, which came from God because that's what he asked for, now finds its fruition in this very first test case. And in that very first test case, you can sit and look at that for a long time to analyze what wisdom is like. But I got to tell you, unless he got to the point of having the sword and getting ready to divide the baby, there would be no wisdom in that circumstance. Right? It has to come to some kind of informed action, or wisdom is an action term. So it came to that kind of action thing. But also, informing that action is a discerning mind. It's understanding something in a unique way that maybe other people don't understand. And so because of that, he asks for a wise, think action, and discerning, understanding mind. That's what God does for him. So in a real sense then, wisdom starts with action, but it's informed by truth. Wisdom is an action that's informed by truth. So we could talk about truth forever, and we have a better grasp on what truth is. But when truth starts to have the traction of going into action, then you're talking about wisdom. So if anyone asks you, what is wisdom then? Wisdom is an action that's informed by truth. But it has to actually manifest somehow. And so you remember me telling you that James's book is more about practice than precept? Wisdom is more about practice than precept. It's action. It's an action that results from truth. So that's what we're talking about as we get into it. That's wisdom. There's one more component. To wisdom. Not only is it an action and it's informed by truth. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God. So the source of wisdom is God and not me. Now, that seems like a Captain Obvious statement. However, this is really the point of this opening discussion on wisdom, which is, you don't got it. Amen. And, sometimes as I watch newscasts, I like to shake my finger and yell at the newscast and say to that person, you don't got it either. So wisdom is something that we don't got. That's the problem. It comes from God. And why? Well, we'll work on that a little bit, but largely because God seems to have a better take on the way things really are than we do. That's actually the gigantic reason. He knows better than we do. And in fact, when Jesus talks about judging, when we looked in Matthew Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount. The problem with Sermon on the Mount about judging, he says, is look, the minute you try and judge somebody else, you got an optical problem. You got something so big in your eyes you can't see. You can't see well enough to make a great judgment. And why? Because you're afflicted with the same problem. But he doesn't say don't judge. He says just get that log out of your eye first, and then you can see to help to get the speck out of someone else's eye. So in large measure, we just can't see well enough to judge. We just can't see well enough to understand the reality of a situation so that we can make a wise action, because we're always acting on incomplete information. That's the problem. And you need to stop yourself every time you're getting ready to engage based on your understanding of a situation and ask yourself 100 times, do I really understand the situation before I take action? Because that's what wisdom's all about, taking action based on understanding. Let's test it with Solomon for a second. Solomon was getting ready to cut those two babies in half. What was it he knew about the nature of these two women that made this action so wise? What did he know? How was he informed in his heart about the hearts of these two women? The one woman who basically had stolen the child, the other woman who was actually its mother. What did he know that was different between those two women's hearts?
They were selfish.
One would be selfish, and one would be loving for the baby. He knew that would be really the case. And so when you get ready to divide the baby, the selfish one, who's operating probably more in spite, would say, yeah, vindictiveness. Yeah, I lost my baby. She should lose her baby. Sure, let's cut the baby in half. The real mother, whose heart is still compassionate toward the baby, would say, no, I'd rather give up my baby to this woman than have the baby killed. So that's a keen insight into the human heart. How did he get that? He asked God to give him that understanding. So he uses this keen understanding, comes from God, about the hidden nature of the human heart in this particular situation, and again from God comes up with an action in order to display the nature of those two hearts, and then out as a result who's the real mother. I mean, it's brilliant. It's really brilliant. But without understanding the difference between the two women's hearts, it wouldn't work. And so he had that as well. So that's why we see that there's truth. And the source of that truth needs to be God and not me. Not me. And not me is the problem. Proverbs 12:15 says, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. Okay? I always like to rephrase this. A way of a man is right in his own eyes, and he won't listen for directions. Sorry, that was a little too close to home. But just a tiny bit of that attitude is what we all share. It's not just a men thing. We come upon situations and think, I know what's right here. I know what to do about this. And sometimes we do. I mean, admittedly, sometimes we do. But you always have to ask God, do I really know what's going on right here? Because it seems like this is what I should do. I'm coming to you so I can listen. So when you're in a situation where a decision, where an action needs to be made, we're pressed to do the action, to just rush right in and do the particular thing. But maybe what you need to do is listen before you rush in. And that's what he says right here. A fool, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes. Oh, by the way, I'll go back to that for a second. That right there is also the proverb that could have been pasted across the book of Judges. Because in the book of Judges, that period in Israel's history, after they come into the land with Joshua and before they have their first king, this kind of weird in-between period, it says over and over and over again, from the outset of Judges to the end of Judges, the life in Israel was really bad because everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And if you want to see how bad life is, when you do everything that you think is right in your own eyes, read the book of Judges. It's like a dark graphic novel. Over and over. With little bright spots here and there. Deborah, woohoo! Samson, woo! Gideon, woo! But in between those, they did what was right in their own eyes. That's so. If you want to find out what man's like when he does what's right in his own eyes, read The Lord of the Flies. So that's what we're talking about. It seems right, and we're not intentionally trying to be stupid and do bad things, but what seems right many times for us is actually very, very wrong. And why? Because we lost our marbles at the fall. We don't have a real good sense of righteousness anymore. God's got to give it to us. Okay, so with Solomon's admission, remember Solomon said when he had this dream, I do not know how to go out or come in. And that's the key to having wisdom, is to admit that you're stupid. that you just don't got it. You really don't have wisdom. Now, with time, God develops wisdom in you, but even that came from God. You just have to understand that in order to navigate the circumstance you're in and to come up with a wise action, you got to start with the fact that you're not self-generating this. This is coming from God. Okay, so he knew that. I don't even know how to go out and come in. I'm like a child, is what he says. So in 5, and if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God. It should say, all of you lack wisdom, so ask God. It's really coming. It's a gentle way of saying, but we all do. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach. Woo-hoo! Woo-hoo-hoo! So, if you feel stupid in the situation, don't know what to do, hey, join the club. We're all in that position. Should I ask God for wisdom? What if God, when I pray, says, are you kidding me? Are you asking me for wisdom on something as stupid? You mean you don't know what to do? Everybody, God says, knows what to do in that circumstance, and you're wasting my time. I got all these fires all over the world, and you're wasting my time asking me for wisdom in this situation. Just go talk to your friends. They'll tell you what to do. That, by the way, is reproach. And God does not do that. And God does not do that. Thankfully, when we come to him and say, I don't know what to do, God does not reproach us. He doesn't tear us down and say, come on, you know better than this. He just says, okay, you've come to the right place. And how much does he give? Generously. He goes beyond even what you ask, when you ask. So the key he's saying right here, and again, it sounds like Captain Obvious, but it's really not, is admitting to yourself while you admit to God that I don't think I got it. I don't think I've got the wisdom that I need in this situation. In fact, I'm pretty sure I don't. So I'm going to come to God, and God's not going to dress me down because I'm admitting that I'm an idiot in the circumstance. Because what I'm saying is, oh, look, I lost some marbles, and I'm asking for some of those marbles back right now in wisdom. And I need you. I need this from you. It's got to come from you. And then expectantly await God's wisdom, and he'll give it generously. Generously. I pray this all the time. I'll show you an example at the end. But I pray this all the time in situations where I say, God, I'm clueless. I just don't know what to do here. Someone lays something in front of you. You go, oh, man. Whoa. I don't know. Not only do I not know what to say, I don't know what to do. Do you experience that at all? I mean, I do all the time. And so as a reflex, I say, God, I need your wisdom. This is way beyond my pay grade. But God, you see what's going on, and you see their hearts, and you see the circumstances. In fact, since you're an eternal God who's outside of time and space, you see the whole road before this person. So I'm yours here. I need your wisdom. And I'm not going to try and insert my own wisdom right here. I'm not going to say, well, in my vast experience, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to, that has some value, but unless it came from God originally, you're just spewing smoke. God, I need you right here. And God does not reproach you. He doesn't dress you down. And he gives generously. That's really great news. That's really great news. And it'll be given to him. So that's a promise right there. That's called a promise. Ask if you lack wisdom. Ask God. It'll be given to you. It will. It will. How does it happen, though? Do you get a telegram from God? Wisdom 101 from God. Jim, what you need to do? That's never happened. An angel at the foot of my bed. Oh, Jim, here's the answer to... that's never happened either. How does it happen? Facebook notifications. That hasn't happened yet. And because God does not have a Facebook page. That's how I know it's never happened yet. Well, there's various ways. And this is where there's a little bit of mystery in all of this. Because I have experience where God does indeed provide you the wisdom. How does he do it? You can stop worrying about that. He is more capable of getting the message to you than you are at second guessing him. So don't get out of the second-guessing mode with God and say, God, look, this is all you said I have to do. I just have to come to admit the fact that I need you, and I don't have wisdom, and wisdom comes from you. So here I am, and you promise you'll give it generously. And how is up to him. So why don't you just leave that up to him? But what you have done, which is most significant in the circumstance, is you have abandoned your reliance on your own man-made wisdom. That thing that looks right in your own eyes, because after all, from the fall, we're fools. So that's what you've abandoned. And in abandoning, that was the step you needed to take, and that's really all the step you had to take was abandon that and then go to God and say, God, I need your wisdom. And he says it will be given generously. So get out of the business of second-guessing God. He'll get it to you somehow. Sometimes, practically speaking, it comes through the scriptures. I've had that happen to me. Sometimes, no kidding, it's come in a dream, like that wakeful spot when you're waking up in the morning and the day's issues are kind of crowding on your head and you're still kind of groggy-minded. And I start my early prayers and when I'm on my pillow and I talk to God about stuff, and then things start showing up in my head. And I'd like to say that it's the result of a nice night of sleep, but I think it's more the fact that He's talking to me, and we talk about stuff. So, there's lots of ways that this happens. It can come through prayer. Don't worry about it. God is a better sender than you are a receiver, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay? He's got this down. I don't know why I put that picture in there, but I wanted to see it one more time. Okay, that's a fool. By the way, we look at him and we kind of condescendingly say that's a very foolish thing to do. But in every circumstance of life, since we are fools as well, that's what we're doing in every circumstance in life. We really sort of are. So just the next time you're challenged to do something wise, remember, you're the kid with the knife getting ready to shove it in the wall. So ask God for wisdom and he'll give it to you. Okay, let's move on to the rest of the passage. Oh, I just want to emphasize this too. This first part of James is about being in tough times. That's my best picture of being in tough times. So throughout, I think about through verse 27 or so in the beginning of James, I'm convinced he's talking to us in the midst of the troubled times, the difficult times, to stay under these things. So I think probably in difficult times, you're more stressed to come up with wise actions than almost any other time in your life. When everything's fine, it's hard, you don't really need to. But in tough times, you need to. So just saying, that's what he's talking about. That's his chief aim in all of this. So wisdom is an action that's informed by the truth, and the one who has the best truth is God himself, is the source. So that's those three components. But again, unless it takes action, it's not really wisdom, it's just truth. The source is from God. And so instead of us saying, hey, what do they know? I'm just going to do this anyway. You got to realize that God's got that truth. Okay, last picture of that guy. Let's go to the rest of it. Verse 6, but let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that's driven and tossed by the wind. You got to have sound effects for this. Yeah, like the waves of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he'll receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. So if you're going to go to the Lord and ask him for wisdom, you have to be convinced of the fact that what he's going to tell you is wise. Now, it seems like a dumb thing to say. Because if I'm going to go to the Lord and he's better informed on the human heart and the circumstances around me, of course I'm going to take what he says. But you don't. Sometimes you come to him asking for wisdom and God provides you with wisdom and you go, well, I don't know. In my experience, and then suddenly what you're doing is you're weighing God's wisdom with your foolishness. And you're starting to say, maybe I need to kind of superintend and stand in judgment over God's wisdom to me. Well, in that case, you're going to be whipped back and forth because your well-informed wisdom is not as well-informed as you think it is. And in fact, it's informed by different winds of our culture that are steering you around, and you're really not as sure as you think you are, and yet you're going to use that resource to judge the wisdom that comes from God. See, there's the problem. So what he's saying right here is what you need to do is when you go to the source, stay with the source. Understand that what you hear from God is going to be wise. If you don't, there's good reason to believe that God's not going to whisper anything in your ear if you're going to sit there and be in judgment about what he's going to say. Now, it doesn't mean you need to turn off your brain. But what you do need to do is by faith. Remember, faith is a kind of it's a word that means convincing. I'm convinced of a certain thing, and as a result, I act on that certain thing. For instance, I'm convinced in faith about the character of God, and hence I'll take action to trust in God. So it's really a convincing. Pistis and pistio in belief is like a convincing. I'm convinced of this, and hence I take action. That's faith. So if you go to God in faith without doubting, knowing that the source from God is going to be true and it's going to be wise, okay. But if you're really not sure of that, If instead you're saying, well, I've read a lot of the Quran, I've read a lot of Buddha, I've read a lot of Confucius, I think I need to include in my wisdom diet a little bit from God as well, God may not get into that game with you. Because he wants you to be in this position where you say, God, all my sources are false. I need your wisdom. That's what he's saying right here. So you got to understand that when you commit to listening to God, what he says is not something you're going to weigh against your own wisdom or against, say, Buddha's wisdom. It's God's wisdom, and so we're going to let that stand. So that's what he's saying right there. Don't be tossed around. Does this really happen? Yeah, it does really happen. And we question the source because we have competing sources is what James is saying. The winds are those competing sources. And here's some of the winds in our culture, the competing sources of wisdom that we listen to, that yell in our ears. For instance, my teachers disagree with God on what God is saying in his wisdom. Or my family disagrees with God, and they say this, but God says that. Or my friends disagree with God, and so my friends think this, but God says that. Maybe God's not right when my friends are more right. These are competing winds, competing sources. My culture disagrees with God. So these are all competing winds that toss you like water if you're not actually looking to the one source God. My own intuition disagrees with God. So one of the competing winds that tosses you about is you. Remember that old Pogo cartoon? We've found the enemy, and he is us. People don't know the Pogo cartoon. You got to be really old to know Pogo. Let's do a poll. Who remembers Pogo? Old people, see? But the phrase is just about the only thing that has survived with Pogo. We've met the enemy and he is us. So this is really the issue. Your own intuition tends to judge God's wisdom that you receive from him. And you go, I don't know. That just doesn't feel right. Well, who are you? You've lost your marbles. Things like this, and these are topics that come up. I'll just bring you 3 topics to think about. In the modern culture, especially, the whole discussion about self is just radically warped and unwise. And the epitome of it, you hear a commercial, and the commercial says, such and such a product, you deserve this. No, I don't, actually. You deserve this. I mean, it appeals to the fact that your sense of self is overinflated. We don't deserve those things. In fact, we deserve nothing. All we like sheep have gone astray, and each of us has gone to his own way. We don't deserve these things. So when you look at culture in general, you hear how things are talked about. There's such an elevation of self in everything that's talked about in our culture. Self, 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 self. It's all about you, 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 you. It's all about you. And all advertising is aimed at you and the elevation of self. Everything is aimed at self. So I don't have time to really go in the depth of this, but this is a grotesque cancer in our culture. Is it is so self-oriented that there is no others orientation left anymore in the culture. It's gone. As opposed to the fact that biblically speaking, we should of more than anyone else be others oriented supremely and in the majority of our thinking rather than selfish oriented. So that's just a gigantic issue. Let me give you another issue. Lies. The culture says you can lie a little bit. I mean, come on. If it's for the benefit of the other person, why wouldn't you just twist the facts a little bit? Just a little white lie. Little white, nice. And it goes on after that. And at the beginning of the year, I talked about the coming election year, the first Sunday in January, and I talked about the fact that politics is all it's an art form of refined deception. So in our politics, and we're in a political year because of the election in November, it's all about getting you to believe something that's not true. That's called deception. But the art form is the fact that you can get someone to believe something that's not true as long as you don't overtly lie about it. So in that case, what I'm really doing is lying. I'm just manipulating you to the untruth. And technically it's not lying, but it is lying. is what it is. So in our culture, misrepresenting the truth by lying is okay, but there's still a small vestige in public where you can be ridiculed if you're caught in a lie. So you use everything possible to get you to the same place without actually lying. That's politics 101, by the way. In every partisan side of politics, that's politics 101. Yeah, Ellie Mae?
As Christians, aren't we supposed to love, 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 love?
Love, love, love. And is love, love, love a self thing or an other thing?
How about truth?
Other thing.
Because with regard to
Truth.
with regard to feelings, truth doesn't care about your feelings.
Right. Truth is just an objective statement of reality, the way things are. Which is why God is such a good source for our truth, because he sees the way things are more than we do. We're easily bamboozled by all that stuff. So anyway, lies are actually culturally acceptable today, almost completely. But there's one last vestige where you can't. And then let me give you one more topic area where the culture disagrees with the wisdom of God. Get ready to wince. Sex. Now, I'm old enough to remember. There's that age thing again. I'll stop saying that. But I'm old enough to remember when it was not socially acceptable to live together before marriage. Socially acceptable in terms of cultural mainstream, that was the case. And now it is. And with all the sexual connotations involved. I bring this up and I say wince. I'm being a little bit silly when I say that, but the issue is that we all wince a little bit in the area of sex, and I'm not going to get on that, but what I'm really talking about is the fact that in our general culture and what people believe, God's wisdom on sex is radically different than the cultural wisdom on sex. And again, I come back to the fact that God, who made us to start with, he made us sexual creatures. He understands our sexuality. I would think he would be a better source of wisdom on sexuality than we are. So as I also am old enough to remember growing up through the late 60s and the sexual revolution that came after that, sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all that kind of thing, and the freeing up of sexuality, I think God's wisdom is smarter than the culture's wisdom, even though it keeps going through these revolutions. I'm pretty sure of that. And in fact, I'll just give you one small example. When it comes to sexuality, sexuality can be used in such violent and deeply wounding ways. We're talking about rape when you get to that, and the scarring that happens from rape, for instance, is probably the most deep scarring anyone can have. It's just a profoundly deep wound. So when you look at that, and when no one disagrees on that, so when you just look at that, you say, I think there's something more going on in sexual activity than just the plumbing. I think there's something very deeply connected to our souls in sexuality. And so who do we think we are to turn the human reproductive system into the human recreational system? You see? So I'm not trying to be a pruder. I'm just saying I think God's got a better handle on this than I do because he made us. And we have these hints that there's deep soulish connections in sexuality that cause us to take a couple steps back and say, I think I'm going to be cautious here. I think I'm going to lean on what God's wisdom is rather than my own, because there's more going on than meets the eye in sexuality. And we already know that. Right? So this is another one of those areas where people look at us believers who listen to God's wisdom on sexuality and say, man, you guys are so antique. You are so out of, don't you know that we're all freed now sexually? How can you believe that stuff? You are like, are you living in the 50s or something? No, I'm living in the Bible or something is what I'm doing. So God made sexuality and he prescribed sexuality in a certain way. And I think we do well to adopt God's wisdom because he made us. The source is better than we are. So I'm just saying, this is just 3 topics. We could go on forever.
That's kind of like divorce, too.
Divorce is the same way. Yeah, we could go on and on where the culture's wisdom is not God's wisdom. Oh, look, my friends, what we need to do is go to God and say, I've lost my marbles. I don't have what it takes to be wise. God, I need you. Like Solomon, I feel like a child in some of these issues. So here I am. I'm waiting for your wisdom because it uniquely comes from you and nowhere else, even if I find out it's at odds with my culture. Culture shifts. And what culture would claim is its wisdom shifts. Well, God's wisdom then never shifts. And it's based on the fact that the way we're designed by God is the way we're designed by God. So that doesn't shift. So I'm just saying that we are easily influenced by the winds of culture. And just realize that's what it is and say, what does God say on this? Because after all, I think the winds of culture are not as well as formed as the creator of the universe in wisdom. So that's all I'm saying. And that's what James is saying. You need to go to the source and stay with the source. Don't be double-minded. Because look, the source, God, who understands the true and hidden nature of creation better than anyone else? Well, God does. Who grasps the complexities of the human heart better than anyone else? Well, God does. Who understands mankind the best? God does. So when it comes down to wisdom, go to the source, who is God, and listen to what he says. Well, how's he going to tell me? Just stop asking that question. He'll get it to you. He really does. He'll get it to you. But go to the source and ask him, and don't rely on your own wisdom, because, by the way, too, your own wisdom is so heavily influenced by the winds of culture, and you don't even realize it. So he said, you do this by faith. You ask in faith, and he'll give you this wisdom. Faith, again, is an expectation based on being convinced of the character of God. So he'll do that for you, and he promised it to us straight up. Okay, we've dwelt on that long enough. I just wanted to do one more picture like that. I really like that picture. I have a 60-year flashback every time I look at that picture. I go, man, I don't know how I am still alive. I have been shocked so many times. I have been seduced by those outlets so many times. Oh, man. So, Psalm 53:1. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. And I rephrase that for this picture, not Psalm 53, but Jimmy 53:1. The fool says in his heart, there's no power company. I just can't leave the picture alone. So look, just remember, you lost your marbles at the fall. You don't have what it takes to judge things well enough to be wise. That wisdom is gone. It's just gone. There's one source of wisdom, that's God himself. And if you don't have the wisdom of God in the circumstance you're in for the action you want to take, you're sticking a butter knife into an outlet and thinking you're safe. You don't know what you're getting into. Just don't know what you're getting into. Okay, now I think that's the last time for that picture. I can't guarantee it, but we'll see where that goes. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. This is one of my favorite examples, Jehoshaphat, back in 2 Chronicles 20. Before we read that, let me set it up for you, because it's a story I come back to so many times. Jehoshaphat, I have been voting with God to rewrite Hebrews 11, the heroes of faith, so that Jehoshaphat gets put in there. God's not going to rewrite Hebrews 11. I'm just kidding with you. But Jehoshaphat, king of Israel, king of Judah at the time, he gets word of the fact that three adjacent nations have teamed together to invade Israel and wipe it off the face of the earth. Very reminiscent of the Six-Day War in 1967 and the Yom Kippur War in 1973. But these three nations have conspired together. They've crossed across the Jordan. They're coming up from the south. They're getting ready to obliterate Israel. News comes to Jehoshaphat, the king, and Jehoshaphat goes, oh no. And he talks to his advisors. His advisors give them all of their great wisdom and strength and all that kind of thing. I don't know what to do. He calls for his prophets to come. And then finally he says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to God, and in fact, I'm going to go to God publicly, so let's gather everyone together. Everyone come into town one day. Jehoshaphat gets up on a really large ladder. I don't know what he does, but he gets up someplace higher we can hear him, and he prays publicly to God. Okay? He still hasn't a clue what he's going to do. Remember, wisdom is an action. Jehoshaphat doesn't know the action, the wisdom, the wise thing to do when three nations are coming in. They're clearly outnumbered. I mean, if you just count from a human perspective, the resource mismatch is so bad, they're going to be snuffed out in a heartbeat. So he says, let's gather all the people together, and I'll pray, and this is what he prays. O our God, will you not execute judgment on them? For we are powerless against this great horde that is coming against us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. I pray this prayer all the time. I do not know what to do, but my eyes are on you. I do not know what to do, but my eyes are on you. So what's required of you is turn your attention away from the winds that buffet you around. Turn away from the wind that actually is you yourself, your intuition about what's wise. Turn away from all those sources, and your job is to turn your attention to the one and only God who knows mankind, who knows your heart, who knows your situation, and to keep your focus in his direction. Well, will he come through for me? How will he communicate these things to me? Your job is to fix your gaze. But before you fix your gaze, you had a previous job, and you know what that previous job was? It's the first half of this phrase. I don't know what to do. I haven't got it. I don't got it. I don't got it. I don't get it. I don't got it. So I'll go to God, because he's got it. That's your job, basically. And so when in James, and you look at James, that's what James is trying to say to you. He's not going to tell you the method in which God gets you his wisdom. He'll get it to you. He's good at this. Don't worry about that. Your job is to set your focus in the right direction. That's your job. That's your job. And wait on the Lord, and he'll provide for you. He will. That's the simple thing. Now James only introduces the topic of wisdom right here. He's going to come back to it in chapter 3 in big time. This is in black and white. It's in color when you get to chapter 3. So this is just his introduction to it. It's his ABCs of wisdom. It's the bits that you've lost to make sure you complete. But the first bit is very important on this. The key to wisdom isn't reading a lot of books on wisdom literature. The key is where you set your gaze from where you get your source of information for wisdom. That's your job. That's your job. Set it on the Lord. And when you do that, he won't dress you down and berate you and reproach you because you're so bereft of the wisdom. He won't take you down for that. Instead, he very generously gives to you. And that's good. I think I'm done. You're probably asking yourself, but what happened to Jehoshaphat? Well, go read it for yourself. I have to tell you everything.
And now for the rest of the story.
I can give you a little bit. They don't get destroyed. But it's how they don't get destroyed that's very fascinating. Yeah. So anyway, go back and read Jehoshaphat. I like to say his name anyway, so I'll just say Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat. I don't know what to do, but my eyes are on you. You know, as an aside to that whole story in Chronicles about Jehoshaphat and this phrase right here, last summer I spoke at a youth camp up near Park City. I've combined a bunch of churches from Salt Lake City. They asked me to come and speak to all the kids. And I spoke, and I gave them 5 different stories from the Old and New Testament, and this is one of them with Jehoshaphat. And I said this phrase, I think maybe 50 times. And at the end of that week, I had kids, we're talking 15, 16-year-old kids, come up to me and say, I don't know what to do. I'll set my eyes on God. Teenagers. I don't know what to do. And if you can remember back to when you were 16, you thought you knew what to do. So for them, step A, to admit that they don't. I don't know what to do, but my eyes are on you. I just came away from that just elated. I said, well, God, if that's all they got, I think we got there, right? God said, yep. That's the beginning of wisdom right there. Go to God. Father in heaven, we thank you for your great love toward us in that when we come to you out of our need, our stated need, which you yourself, through your Spirit, give us the understanding of our need to start with. But we come to you in our need, and we ask for wisdom. Just the practical side of life. God, give us wisdom. You don't dress us down. You don't ridicule us. You say, great, let's do it. And you give generously. So, Lord, we're here right now, admitting to you that we're very needy of that. We live in a world, a culture which thinks it's wise, and yet it revokes its wisdom, it seems like, every generation. I mean, how wise can it be if it gets overturned every 20 years. I mean, it's just a crazy thing. So, Lord, we understand that there's craziness in the cultural wisdom that we're in the midst of. But, Lord, we also understand that we're very susceptible to these voices. There's pieces of these things that work into us. So through your Spirit that lives within us, we pray that you would continue to ferret out these things as well, where our thinking is warped by a very fallen and selfish world, that you would instead replace that understanding with your understanding about the way things are. You yourself are our great God, the great Creator, the one who knows us intimately, who's made us in marvelous ways. You are the one of the source of that kind of wisdom. And Lord, for the purposes of glorifying you and making known who you are, we pray that you would give us your wisdom, that in our actions that are informed through your truth, people would be pointed back to you. So thanks for this passage, and we thank you for what's coming up in James, and pray that your Spirit would give us deep understanding and wisdom as a result of these things. Amen.